everyone. Welcome back to the CCO Follow podcast. Over this past month, we've been talking about fasting and prayer. Last week, we covered prayer, and this week, we're going to be talking about fasting. And it's good that we're talking about fasting because in a few days, we're going to be fasting ourselves as a church. We're doing a week of fasting and prayer. And so this episode is going to be kind of focused more on how to fast. We have the Syncs on today, Travis and Alicia, and we're just really excited to dive into what fasting is all about and how we actually do it practically. And yeah, I guess just to get started, Alicia, why do you fast? How do you fast?
I expected Travis to answer that question. You fast to basically set aside some extra time in your routine, and honestly, it's kind of a physical reminder. You're hungry, and you're taking all that time that's normally dedicated to food. We dedicate a lot of time every day and money to food, and when you take that out of your life, often it creates pockets of time and money that you can spend on just extra time to seek the Lord and worship Him.
That's good.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, I think John Piper was the one who said it. He probably was quoting someone else originally, but that fasting is letting go of God or letting go of things so you can grab on to God. Mm-hmm. And so I think you mentioned, Alicia, of so you can seek God in prayer and stuff like that. Fasting, I think it was Chuck Lind who said that fasting without prayer is starvation. We're not just fasting by itself is nothing. It's fasting with prayer, fasting with service, fasting with, and then letting go of something and then grabbing on to something else. Yeah.
And I'm very thankful that we talked a lot about prayer last week, because I think they have to go hand in hand, what you're saying. Mm-hmm. If we try to fast, and it's some people try to fast for health, some people, and that's fine.
Yeah.
It might work.
It does.
That's great.
I mean, I think it does help.
Yeah.
There are many other benefits, but what is your reason?
Exactly. And I think for us, if we're not intentional about fasting in a way that we're giving up something so that we can pursue Him, like we talked about in the very first episode with mm-hmm. Kirsten, the idea of, if we're not pursuing the person that we're gonna be with for eternity, then what are we doing?
We'll enjoy eternity very much.
Exactly. And so fasting is just a way that we can intentionally suffer to hopefully help our hearts grow more into, I want the Lord. I desire the Lord. I don't need this other stuff, even though we need food.
Yeah.
But the Lord provides. So I guess today there's a lot of different, like we said, with the world can fast just for health and stuff, but we fast spiritually. What does that mean?
We fast physical things. The classic one is food, and I think there's a lot of good reasons for that, which I think we'll talk about. But you can fast different things in the world. And I don't want to say of the world, because that sounds like you're fasting from bad things. I think I was involved with a lot of different church plants for a while, and one of the guys was talking about how someone got saved and came to his church. He's like, God, I'm thinking about, actually maybe John was telling this story. I don't know where I heard it now. There was a guy, and he came to the pastor and he was like, hey, I'm thinking about fasting from pornography. And the pastor's like, you really should just stop that, because that's sin. And so I don't want to say fasting from things of the world, because that implies sin. Yeah. But just fasting from things that I think Hebrews talks about, weighs us down. As well as fasting from things that, are good and part of normal life routines. Paul talks about 1 Corinthians of husbands and wives abstaining from sex for a time so they may focus on God. And he's like, you shouldn't do that indefinitely. And it's not that that's a bad thing, but it's a good thing to pause. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of things that we do in our everyday life that are good to pause from so you can focus on God.
Yeah. The way that I was kind of taught fasting and just how I heard about it was my pastor a while back was talking about, okay, if you're thinking about fasting something, it's if you think about something you need every single day, that's something you should probably fast. And so a lot of people are like, well, I need all this extra stuff that's just kind of just what you're saying, weight, mm-hmm. And some of that social media, I guess it's a fine fast, and I think for some it definitely is, but more of like, maybe I challenge people, maybe instead of just saying I'm going to fast social media, because we really don't need social media, maybe it's fasting screens altogether, and I know that that's kind of taking it to the next level, but I definitely think what you're saying is food is one of those things that we know we absolutely need, and so that's something that we could give up.
Yeah.
What about for you, Alicia? How long have you fasted?
I think the most I've ever fasted was 3 days. We were doing a week fast, but we got invited to this dinner party with Travis's coworkers, a lot of whom Travis was actively trying to witness to, and it was like a really cool opportunity to spend time with them outside of work. So we broke our fast smack in the middle. I never recommend doing that. It was horrible.
It was terrible.
Oh, geez.
You like felt sick eating, and then it was like
you started not eating.
and then it was like starting the fast all over again. And the next day was like equally as hard as the first day, if not harder. Yeah. So if you're going to do a week fast, just do the whole thing. But yeah, so I think 3 days.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
how long have you, when did you start fasting, in your life?
I think the first time I fasted was in high school when we did a 30-hour famine. As the high school youth group, we would raise money.
Did you guys go to the same?
We did go to the same youth group, but I did it in middle
okay.
school too, because I was
Okay.
more holy.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I didn't start going to the same this youth group, actually, till high school. But yeah, so I did the 30-hour famine in high school.
What was that? I'm just curious. What was that like for you? If you can remember back then, what was that like?
I remember I was like 30 minutes in and I forgot and started eating something. And I think it was like a Frosty or something, like random like that. And then, yeah, but I was hungry.
Yeah.
It was fun because it was a little easier and fun because you spent most of the 30 hours like at youth group with all your friends. Like,
Oh, gotcha.
we did like service projects. We weeded garden beds and planted flowers and I don't know, raked leaves and all sorts of stuff. So the next morning was the hard part when you were like, had gone all afternoon, evening, night, and then it's still morning and you're hungry, but you're outside working in the sun. That was probably the hardest part.
Yeah.
But it was fun because there was the distraction of like with youth group, but it was kind of good and just eye-opening of like, oh, this is what fasting was. And especially I remember hearing some of the youth leaders at the time talking about their experiences because they were like doing it with us, and how they were approaching it and what God was teaching them. That really taught and molded it for me of like, oh, this is like how you process fasting and what you do. And that it's not like, oh, I'm just like a high schooler, so I'm going to have a hard time with it. Like these adults are too, who've walked with God for a lot longer than I have.
Yeah. That's good. Well, and what we're saying is fasting is letting things go. And Travis, how do you let things go in your life?
Yeah, I'm very good at letting go of emotions and other things that drag me down throughout the day. I think, actually, I remember going to this conference one time where, I'm going to blank on his name now. He writes tons of those. Max Lucado? That's an author? That's not
know.
the painter, right?
Maybe.
There was some conference. I
Sure.
want to say it was him. Fact check me later. But he had us actually go through the exercise of like holding out our hands, like cupping our hands together, and then thinking about the things that were like stressing us or we're anxious about, different stuff like that, and literally like lifting it up and whether saying out loud or in your mind and heart, like just being like, God, like I want to give these to you and not take them back.
Yeah.
And it is funny how, throughout scripture we see how much our posture plays into how our heart responds. And that is a very interesting posture exercise. If you've never done that before, it's very, it helps you realize what you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there's some weird spiritual thing, but like it helps your brain and heart connect to this idea of like, I'm giving this to God.
Right.
Because saying it, but then doing this physical act that like reflects
Right.
how you would give someone something is just different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of aspects to giving up, and I think part of that is maybe using your body to show like this is giving up.
Right.
I think that happens a lot with fasting. You mentioned, Alicia, about like when you're fasting, how it constantly reminds you that you're hungry, but that that's part of giving up. Is it has this built-in reminder of, oh, I'm lacking something from my normal life.
Yep.
And so it reminds you I should be filling it with something else.
Yeah, that's good. And that's kind of where I'm at with with this whole idea. I mean, Christianity really is like, it's dying to self, right? It's becoming more like Christ, which is denying ourselves. And I think fasting is a very, what's the word? Just, it's very much denying yourself because, yeah, man, I'm hungry. I want to eat. And it's like, nope, I'm going to deny myself. But then it's that taking that leap forward, because you could be crazy and just deny yourself. You don't have to do it. You don't have to pursue the Lord. You could just be a crazy person.
Yeah.
But we decide, okay, we're denying ourselves because we want to be more like him and we want to pursue him. And so I'm curious, maybe because you guys are obviously married, you have a family. Do you ever, like, how do you introduce fasting with your kids? Do they do it? Do they not do it? What's your philosophy behind that? I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, our oldest is 8. And so at this point, we haven't introduced anything. I think we actually might.
We have talked about the last 2 years as the church has done this prayer and fasting week. We've talked about it with the older 2 a little bit because they've noticed like, Dad's not eating dinner with us or breakfast with us or whatever. Or, and so like, what's going on? Why is that happening? So they're curious and they want to know. So we've talked to it about them. Obviously, as kids, it would not be healthy for them to fast food for an extended period of time. Their metabolisms just go so fast and they're so small. But, we've talked to them about it and about why we do it and why it's important. And I don't know. I don't know when we would,
Yeah, maybe. I'm guessing middle school, since that's personally what I had experience with, is a time where we would encourage them. Just like most spiritual disciplines, I feel like forcing on someone isn't helpful. Yeah. But giving them the option to participate with us, at least with food. I can imagine before then talking to them about how you can fast other things and offering if they want to fast anything in particular.
Yeah.
But
I definitely think, every year when we do it, or if, Travis or I were to fast at another time, that is an opportunity, especially if it's food where they can see it really clearly. Yeah. That's a good opportunity for us to just talk about it and reinforce it.
Teaching moments.
And long before, hopefully, they ever fast for the first time, they would have an understanding, developing an understanding of what it is and why.
I was just curious about that, because I think for certain spiritual disciplines, what you said it like perfectly. You never want to force something onto someone. And when you're talking about like the act of you kind of doing that was helping like posture your heart, how, as a Christian, we do this a lot where we know what we should be doing. But on the flip side, like our flesh and sometimes like we're not bent that way. We don't want to do that. Where does it meet going from not wanting to do something and just doing it because that's what we should do, to now I'm actually being like spiritually led to do this, and my heart is in the right place. My heart is soft. How do we get from just doing it because this is what the church is doing or this is what everybody should be doing, to I'm actually wholeheartedly doing this for the right reasons?
I actually have 2 thoughts on that. One, I think that even if we go into it with wrong motives, that doesn't mean that God's not still going to use it to work in us and meet with us and change us in the process. Like our motives are not necessarily a determinant of what God's going to do in and through something, because he's bigger than that. And also, I love that throughout the podcast and even just through announcing it on Sundays, we've been talking about it as a church, because, I know for me personally, when it starts coming up, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, that's coming up. And maybe at first when it's far out, I am excited. And then it gets closer and I'm like, oh no, what am I going to fast? How am I going to fast? Like food or a meal? Obviously this time around, I can't fast food because I'm pregnant. And that would not go well. But it's like, okay, so what am I going to fast, and for how long or how much? And then it starts to hit the flesh like rears up and I'm like, nope, I don't want to. Or the things that come to mind potentially for me to fast, I'm like, no, I don't want to fast that. I don't need to fast that. And so I have a month or several weeks of wrestling with God over it. And I try to be intentional when I have those thoughts that come up in the frustration in my heart of like, oh, I don't want to do that I take it to God and pray about it, and he has time to soften and prepare my heart over several weeks.
I love that.
Before we get there, and then probably throughout as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that.
Obviously, I think it's one thing to talk about forcing someone else to do something, but forcing yourself to do something, I think for the most part is generally a good thing, to be honest. It's not an ideal thing. You had said, Alicia, like that, regardless of motives, I'm thinking more a sense of desires, because if you have a motive that's wrong with fasting or prayer or other stuff, I could see it absolutely being the wrong thing to do. Having the wrong motive behind something, but having the just lack of desire where it's like, I just don't want to. Well, guess what? If you force yourself to, it'd still be good for you. And like God would still use it in a great way, or could use it in a great way.
Yeah.
And, ultimately, we can also ask that God would change our hearts and desires. I love Philippians 3, where it's like God works both in us to will and to do for his good pleasure. And it's important for us to remember that sometimes our heart follows our actions, that sometimes simply doing the right thing, our affections follow. And always we can ask God, change my affections. God, I know that I'm doing this with maybe even unknown wrong motives, but I know I'm doing this without desire. Please give me the desire.
Yeah.
And I think it's better for you to take the forced decision
The
step.
action, yeah.
Yeah, that's right and good, and you know is beneficial. Before the desire's there, why wait for the desire? The desire may never come.
Yeah.
And desire may go away and back and forth. We should never blame or hang our hat on what we desire. Bible tells us our hearts deceitfully wicked above all else.
Yeah.
What are we supposed to do with that? Well, we don't follow it then.
Yeah. I love that answer, because it really is a motivation thing. If I think that person who is doing something that they don't want to do and they're forcing themselves to do it, it's as quick as like, why are you forcing yourself to do it? If it's because I know that this is a spiritual discipline and God talks that, tells us we should do this, that's a great motivation for it. But like you're saying, if we're fasting for the wrong reasons, if we're going into it thinking,
this is so I can get this promotion, this is so I can get this car.
Exactly. Yeah. That's not the right motivation.
Yeah.
And
we see in scripture, like people like in Esther, they fast and pray that God would give her success when she sees the king. But I still think ultimately that was like a submission of God. We're letting go of this. This is our outcome desire, but we trust you.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm fasting so I may have this. And if I have this, then I'm just going to never fast again. Like wrong motives of like treating God like a vending machine or something.
Yeah. So I appreciate kind of us talking a little bit more about the meaning behind fasting and the motives behind it. But let's get down nitty gritty. We're about to actually start our fast in a couple days, really.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about food first. How do we fast food? How long? What should we do if we've never fasted before? Any tips? Just get into it.
Consult your doctor. No, I'm kidding. I'm not a doctor, seriously, though.
I mean, honestly, though, if you are like a diabetic or have other underlying health issues, consult your doctor. Yeah.
We'll just point to, we have like 20 doctors and nurses in our church.
Yeah,
like just go to one of them. I'm sure they'll love to hear that, and their phone numbers are. But I mean, for the most part, I think. Well, let's go back to the original goal. The original goal is to let go so you can grab onto God.
Yep.
Fasting food, I think, is the best. Like that's like the ideal thing.
Right.
And I'm not saying other things are not worthwhile. Like we gave the example with Paul in 1 Corinthians. Other things are great and important. I think the thing that's so nice about food is that it ideally saves you time. It saves. It has a built-in reminder for you, because food is part of your normal day, regardless of what culture you're in, regardless of anything. It's a really great, universal thing to fast. It also has built into it, differently than literally anything else we can fast, in that it's not merely something we do, but it's literally part of sustaining us. And so there's a certain amount of realization of how fragile we are and how needy we are and how much we need God. And so I think there's something special and unique about food you don't get with other types of fast. Other types of fast still might give you back time, still might, clear up your mind and free and whatever. But I think there's something unique and special about food. So just throwing it out there, if you've never fasted food before, I think make that a goal, like do some of that. And that doesn't mean, again, back to our goal is to gain time, to spend time with God, to let go of something, to grab God. I wouldn't recommend, if you never fasted food before, fasting for 7 days. I've fasted for 7 days before, and for lots of shorter times and everything in between. But the first time our church started this again, it had been a long time since I fasted more than 24 hours, like at least 3 years, I think, maybe even 4. And I tried being like, okay, well, I fasted a week before, this will be fine. And I had a massive crash halfway through where I was like shaking, and it was like not good. It was like, this is not okay. If I want to fast that long again from food, I need to do 24 hours, then 48, then 72, and like build up from there. So if you've never fasted from food before, I just want to throw out there, it doesn't mean you have to fast 7 days to say you fasted from food.
Yeah.
Like you could essentially eat 1 meal a day and fast 2 meals a day. And that, I think, does a lot of what we're talking about as far as the benefits of fasting.
Yep.
And you're not at risk of, assuming there's no underlying conditions like pregnancy or diabetes, just like that. You're risking literally nothing by eating 1 meal a day. It would be uncomfortable, so you've never, especially if you've never fasted before. But I know many people who miss lunch just because they were busy.
Yeah.
So I mean, missing 2 meals is certainly doable. So I mean, I just want to throw that on the front end.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, definitely. If you've never fasted before,
don't do 7 days straight.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, you could try.
You could try. You absolutely could try.
No, I think in my experience, because I'm relatively new to fasting, I didn't start until we started as a church, really. And so this upcoming week, in a couple days, I'm going to be trying to fast that to 1 meal a day. That's my goal. And it's going to look kind of different because my wife and I actually have a dinner that her company is throwing on one of the days. And so that's going to be different. But with all that said, I think it's important because I am very uncomfortable doing that.
Yeah.
But that's what makes fasting so important. And you said food is so great because it gives us time.
Yeah.
It gives us time to do what? It gives us time to pray and to pursue the Lord, because that 30 minutes or whatever it is that we take usually to eat our lunch or dinner or whatever it is, now we're spending that time and saying, okay, I'm sacrificing that time, I'm sacrificing that meal so that I can be sustained by you, and that's when we pray.
Yeah.
And so but what if we can't? Oh, do you have something?
Well, I was going to say, I think another plus is it tends to make you cranky when you're hungry, which is
such a plus.
It is in the sense that like it shows me anyways, like how little it takes to disrupt my my peace and my joy and just who I am, who I think I am, how good I think I am is all of a sudden torn down very easily by just not having a little bit of food for a while, missing a meal or two. And that immediately just shows us our desperate need for God. And I think that's one of the key parts of fasting is like, wow, I can't even miss a meal and still act like a good, loving, peaceful Christian. Like, oh my goodness. Of course, that's what the whole point is that we can't do it on our own. We need God. And this is just showing me all the more clearly, you can't do this on your own because something as little as a meal is just disrupting everything. You really do need God to produce these things in you.
Yeah. And as a note also, because there's different types of food fasting. You can do like the, I think it's the Elijah fast, where essentially, think paleo without meat, like it's like nuts and things like that. But
some people do bread and water.
Some people do bread and water.
Some people do just liquids only. So they'll have tea or juice or clear liquids. I don't know. Yeah.
But just warning, because I know people who have tried a few of those different fasts. One thing of warning I want to propose to you is if you're considering like, well, I don't want to do a full fast and I want to do like these type of things. Part of the problem is that if it's too different than your normal everyday life, in the like what you have to prep. The people I know who have tried,
they spend more time
prepping. And so like if it's the Elisha fasting like that and it's not like your normal type of meal, what did you really like gain?
Accomplish.
Because again, that would be letting go of certain types of food, but then you still had, your hands were still so full with this other process and this other thing that you just added to your life that you still weren't able to grab onto God. The people I know who have tried that before have been very frustrated at the end of it. It's just like, I was hungry, I ate food that I didn't love, but I had no more time to pray. No more, like, it was pointless.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it is pointless. That's how it felt to them.
So just a word of caution.
Yeah, like just consider before you dive into any type of fast, food or not food, like, does this gain me time back? In what way is this allowing me to spend more time with God, to experience Him more, to let go of things more? And in what ways am I actually going to create more work for myself?
And another word of caution about those, like the so-called Daniel fast or the Elijah fast, like there's nothing especially spiritual about those. They aren't even technical fasts in the Bible. Like that's not why Daniel and his friends only ate vegetables and water. That's not why Elijah ate bread that was brought to him by birds or whatever.
Should be the bird fast. Whatever birds send you, you're allowed to eat.
Oh, goodness.
So there's nothing prescribed in scripture saying that this is a good fast to do. There's nothing like, oh, if you do this fast, then you're going to have this outcome, or you should do this specific diet for these reasons.
Yeah.
It's simply a way that people have chosen to do fasts on occasion.
Yeah.
So,
and I definitely think it's important because instead of, like, maybe just think of it this way, like, instead of trying to make it doable for you, maybe just take less time and say, you know what, there's no way that I can do this, 7 days a week. I don't think I can do this. I think it's better to focus then on, say, okay, let's just take 3 days. If you can do three days where maybe that's just a one meal a day, like that. And if you're doing it in a way that is intentional and it is uncomfortable, but you're intentional about that, I think that is going to be better, especially with your intentionality of time and stuff like that, than trying, well, I'll just have vegetables all day or whatever. Like, it's better to just be intentional and intentionally uncomfortable, even if it's for a shorter period of time. That's how I feel.
Absolutely.
About it.
That's why I'm a big proponent of especially in like a 7-day fast context, where most people, if they try to fast 7 days, would be very in problems. Is be like, okay, then have one meal a day. Like, most people, that's extremely doable for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
And,
or pick one day in that 7-day period and do 24 hours or something,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And have just be focused, like you said, intentional.
And okay, so now let's talk about if you're pregnant. Alicia, you're pregnant.
I've never been pregnant.
What should we do? There's a lot of different other reasons too, other than being pregnant.
Yeah.
That fasting food just isn't an option.
But this is your problem.
But specifically, we're talking about your problem now. What are you going to do, and what are some different options that are good still to fast?
I always like to think about it is what is going to regularly trigger my brain to be like, oh, wait, I can't do that, or I can't have that. Oh, that's my reminder to pray. And what will create more time in my schedule. And what is something that when I think about giving it up, immediately gives a twinge of like, oh, I don't want to do that. Those are kind of some criteria that I use. So a lot of times I've fasted either like social media, or usually it's like social media, audiobooks, podcasts, like any sort of media that I'm consuming. Sometimes I've done it just completely for my entire length of the fast. Sometimes I've done it from like the time I wake up until like after the kids are in bed, and then I'll, watch a show with Travis or something. I know people who fasted from like the news or like sports and sports radio kind of thing that
tend
consumes.
to fast from that.
Travis, our big sports guy,
365 days a year.
Yeah.
For some people, I don't know that this would do it for me, but for some people, just fasting from like coffee or caffeine, because then you're sleepy and you're like, oh, I'm so tired, and you're like get cranky, and you're like, nope, there's a reason I'm doing this, and spend that 5 extra minutes you were gonna go through the Starbucks drive-through, or the 10 minutes you spend at home making your coffee, praying.
No, I think that's good. I mean, I would say coffee, probably don't need it. No. A lot of people love their coffee. But I definitely think as long as the motivation, what you're saying is like, it's giving me more time and it's coming up frequently where I'm like, oh, I can't do this. I think that's a good thing to do. I think it's okay to stack too. Like I think fasting is fine to stack. Like especially like if you're fasting, maybe you're just having one meal a day. Like fast all your entertainment with you too. And just it's supposed to be uncomfortable. It's not a fun thing to do. And it is supposed to bring us closer to God. And so I love that you were talking about all these different things. I would be surprised if my wife ever gave up coffee. She
just hide the coffee machine.
She definitely needs it.
Slash her tires, hide the coffee machine.
Yeah. This reminds me of a story. One of my buddies in college, I don't know how this worked. I mean, I guess it worked in college, but he fasted like all transportation. So like he could only walk. And so it took him a lot of time to get to places, a lot more than he would have normally. Yeah. And he just spent that time praying. And it was an interesting fast. I wish I could do that, but I'd have to leave very, very early. I'd probably have to fast sleep as well, which
it rains here.
Yes. And that would not be fun.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think that the end goal again of like the gaining more time and stuff like that, you made the joke of like fasting sleep, but the reality is I know people who have been like, well, that's what I'm going to fast. And it's like, that will work for a very short time. But the reality is that if the goal is to let go and and grab onto God, what are things that are, I don't want to say reasonable, but that kind of like how you've said is like make you uncomfortable. And it's like, oh, I don't want to give that up. It's like we all say like, well, I'll just give up sleep. Because then it's like, well, I'll just drink a little more caffeine this week, will be fine. Did you really give up for God? Yeah. Or did you just try to fit a little more in your day? And there's a difference.
Yeah. And I definitely think, especially for sleep, like, okay, what are you, and even with when we give up entertainment, what are you filling the time with? Yeah. That's the key is like, what are you filling your time with? Because it's easy just to be like, oh, I give up all screens and stuff, but now I'm on reading books. And
what's funny is on iPhones, there's an app called Shortcuts where you can you have stuff trigger stuff. So you could set it up this week of fast where every time you open the Instagram app, it closes it, opens the Bible instead. Yeah, there you go. You really could. You could take this far. Every app nice. Just redirects you to the Bible.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate, this is something that isn't, it's probably not going to happen to everybody that fasts all the time, but when we're doing it, corporately as a church, we are having these times where it's, the regular breakfast, lunch, and dinner times where we're all meeting, and it's just for prayer, prayer and worship. And if you go to CCO, I recommend coming to those and just, it's a place where you're physically at a place where I'm giving up all of my time right now, and I'm just going to be worshiping. I'm just going to be praying.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay. A couple more questions here before we end. If somebody is considering fasting this week, or maybe they're hearing it and they're like, well, I want to give this a try. What would you have to say to that person?
Do it. You won't regret it.
That's good advice. Okay.
Yeah. Just do it. Good old Nike.
Yeah.
I think I'd say think about it before you practically, you know what I mean? Don't
just jump in that day and say,
not thinking about oh, I have a staff work retreat tomorrow that's going to be all day, and make sure that it works with your schedule, and then the other thing is just the quote that Travis always repeats that he said at the beginning about fasting without prayer is just starvation. That's the whole point. And if the discomfort and the giving up is not urging you on or creating in you turning to God for more prayer and more time with him, then what's the point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in general, like absolutely do it. But think through what that week looks like. So look at your calendar, think about the staff retreats or other stuff you might be going to. Look at your like reality. So if you have kids, you're still gonna be cooking for them. So, what does that look like? If you generally make your food, well, do you need to make sure that, you don't go to the grocery store the week before and get as much stuff because you're not going to eat, you're maybe only eating 1 out of 3 meals. So there's a lot of little practical things that I think just think through what does that week look like and how you should best prepare for that.
Yeah.
And if you have a spouse, let them know too. Travis let me know with like 1 day notice when I'd like meal prepped his lunches for the whole week already.
No.
I was like,
lesson learned.
Are you sure?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, think ahead and think about those who it impacts, whether spouses or kids or things like that.
Yeah.
And plan your default, plan your, if you are fasting, especially something like media or something, or coffee, something that's a little less structured than like an actual meal time. But even with that, like plan, what am I doing instead?
Yep.
How am I connecting with God in that time?
Yeah. Which could look like, even right now, I mean, we just had the prayer podcast, and this is going out just a few days before our church begins to fast. Whether starting right now or in prep the next time you want to fast, that could be just like start writing down and collecting things you've been praying about. I know sometimes during these times, there's been a few different people who've included me in micro groups of like just prayer groups. They've been like, hey, I want to include you. We're all gonna pray for each other during this week and send each other prayer requests, stuff like that. Just making sure that you have. You could always just generally open your Bible and read. You could always, there's always things you could be praying about, but that can help you stay focused, is simply having, like Alicia was saying, just a go-to. This is my list of current prayer requests. This is a thing I'm going to read during this time, and not frittering away the time. Yeah.
If you wake up and you miss breakfast, don't just say, oh, I'll just fast today, because that's not worth it. Like really, like take time and really give it to God. If you're going to fast, be intentional about it, because we've talked about it a bunch in this podcast. It means nothing unless you're intentional about it. And just like a lot of things.
And I think a lot of lingo that I've heard in the church for a long time kind of thrown around is like, oh, well, why are you fasting? Like that is not a bad thing. It is not bad or wrong to fast because you are praying about a specific situation or for a specific thing that you are hoping that God will speak to you on. Also, the main point always should just be to draw closer to God.
Yep.
Just because you are praying and asking God for wisdom about a big decision you have coming up doesn't mean that because you're fasting, he's going to like drop the answer in your lap. It may be just that he draws you closer to his heart so that you are closer to him as you make that decision, after the fast or whatever it is. So like, if you hear that being said, or somebody asks you, oh, like not what are you fasting, but why are you fasting? It's a perfectly acceptable and the best answer to just be like, because I want to draw closer to God. Don't feel like you have to have a very like, for this big life decision or whatever.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. But I mean, just to say in a different way, something you said with that is, even if you have a specific reason, always be open to any reason God might have.
Yeah.
Like, the man plans his way, but God directs his steps. That like, it may be perfectly good for you to have a reason, but don't let that make you have, blinders on to what God might have outside of that.
Yeah. That's great. Great stuff, you guys. Thanks for coming on, Alicia.
Yeah.
And Travis, I know that you're always here, but I'm thankful for you too. And thank you so much for joining with us today. We hope that if you go to CCO, we hope that you fast with us. And if you're listening to this 10 years down the road from it being recorded, then good luck with your fast as well. We look forward to seeing you guys next week. And with that, as always, God bless.